Hi, I'm Dr. Chad Larson. There's a condition or kind of a symptom that actually a lot of people have that they don't realize is a precursor to something worse if it's not taken care of, or if the process gets worse and worse over time, and that is swollen ankles. So a lot of people have swollen ankles, especially if it gets hot out, and they kind of go away, and it only happens in certain situations. But for people who have like chronic swollen ankles, it could mean something that, if left unaddressed, could develop into something worse. So the kind of swollen ankles I'm talking about is where you can actually see changes in your bony anatomy in your foot, like your ankle bones disappear or your foot bones disappear, or you get home from work and you take your socks off and it looks like you had a thick rubber band compressing your skin, and we take the socks off, it looks like it's still there. That's abnormal. That's not normal for that to happen. Or if you reach down and you push on your lower shin bone just above your ankle and you take your finger away, but your finger depression is still there, that also is a sign of kind of chronic edema or swelling in that area. And what this really is coming from is what we call poor venous return. The veins return blood to the heart unoxygenated, and then the arteries deliver oxygenated blood to the rest of the body. So veins take unoxygenated blood to the heart, and poor venous return means that the veins are not as successful at bringing the blood back to the heart. And so in people with this kind of situation, the blood kind of pools down in the lower legs, and it causes fluid to kind of seep out and accumulate in those tissues. So this could ultimately be a cardiovascular issue. Even some people with long-standing poor venous return get kind of discoloration to their lower legs, which sometimes we call the stasis dermatitis. So the stasis part speaks to the blood kind of pooling there and not really flowing the way that it's supposed to. And the dermatitis part of the term means that you get that skin discoloration. So poor venous return can lead to stasis dermatitis, but what it comes down to is those veins are not functioning as good as they can, oftentimes because there's like extra thickness to the blood. The viscosity of the blood is such that the flow through the blood vessels, through the veins, is not as efficient as it should be. And so there's these one-way valves in the lower legs that are kind of like this. So as blood pumps up through, it kind of traps it, and then the blood keeps pumping up, pumping up, pumping up. And sometimes those valves can get weak and kind of leaky, and then blood is allowed to kind of return back down to the lower ankle, and it doesn't get fully kind of brought out of the lower leg. So this is that poor venous return. And there could be an accumulation of a blood component called fibrin, F-I-B-R-I-N, fibrin, that sort of accumulates in the blood and contributes to this sort of blood sluggishness. And if somebody gets a built-up level of this fibrin and a few other factors sort of come together, they're at an increased risk of developing blood clots. Other risk factors that can go along with that are hormonal imbalances, long-term travel. If you're going on a long flight or a long drive and you're stuck in that seated position, you're not getting proper movement through your legs, and this could also exacerbate this sort of poor viscosity, poor blood flow, and could increase the accumulation. You might have noticed this after you go on a long trip or you've been sitting for an extended period of time. You might have more swelling in your ankles than what might be typical for you. And we know that like long flight crews oftentimes have an increased risk for developing things like blood clots or deep vein thromboses, DVTs. And so there's not a lot of support in the natural medicine realm for this issue until finally several years ago, actually a couple decades ago, there was a substance that was released in the natural medicine market that actually worked very, very well. and the name of it was nattokinase, N-A-T-T-O kinase, K-I-N-A-S-E. And this original product worked very well. When a person would, with this kind of condition, or they're going to be under those circumstances where there's going to be a greater chance of blood pooling, more fibrin built up, greater chance of developing a deep vein thrombosis, using nattokinase helped to kind of dissolve some of that fibrin. The way that nattokinase worked is that it's sort of a fibrinolytic, which means it helps to dissolve and break up fibrin. And so that worked well, but it didn't work as well as what followed after that. It's called cardiokinase. Cardiokinase, the name changed, the substance changed a bit, and it was a much more absorbable, much more effective substance that I've used in many cases where a person just wasn't good at getting the right kind of treatment for their swollen ankles, poor venous return, stasis dermatitis, or blood clots, these kind of things where the treatment just wasn't all that successful from a pharmaceutical route. We chose to use this fibrinolytic agent, cardiokinase, and it worked awesome. It's worked in many, many cases with my patients who have this issue. And there's been an interesting new research on this type of nattokinase that we now call cardiokinase. Here's what they did is they wanted to make it even better. Could something else be taken along with it to make the cardiokinase have an even better fibrinolytic effect? So I'll just cut to the chase. They tried a bunch of different things. The thing that helped to really boost the effectiveness and the fibrinolytic activity of cardiokinase was fish oil. Specifically, it was EPA and DHA, eicosapentaenoic acid, and docosahexaenoic acid. These are EPA, DHA, which are abundant in fish oil. If you look on the back of like a fish oil supplement, you'll see that it lists the quantity of EPA and DHA. And so what we learned in this recent study is that if you take EPA, DHA, in other words, fish oil, along with the cardiokinase, it has a really significant increase of efficacy to help break down fibrin, decrease the chance of poor viscosity and dermatitis, stasis dermatitis, and poor venous return. This is the bottle of cardiokinase, and this has the substance in it that's actually derived from a fermented soy product called natto, N-A-T-T-O. And so the kinase part is an enzyme that was found in the natto to have this really remarkable fibrinolytic effect that really has not been found in any other natural sources. So this is a natural supplement. You don't have to have a prescription for that, but it has a really significant effect on this fibrin that can build up in the blood, increase our chance of things like blood clots, and also increase our chance of stasis dermatitis and poor venous return and that kind of swelling of the ankles. So if this is something that you or someone you know has an issue with, I would really have you consider taking cardiokinase and also, fish oil along with it. So there's a bit of a dosing consideration that you want to know about if you take cardiokinase. The upside is that cardiokinase works very effectively. The downside, if you want to call it that, is that it has a pretty short half-life in the system. It only has that fibrinolytic effect for maybe 5 or 6 hours. So you want to take a capsule about every 5 or 6 hours, especially if you're gonna, you're trying to prevent an issue by going on a long plane flight. You want to decrease the issue of swelling or even developing a DVT, or maybe you've had a history of a DVT and you want to prevent a future one, or you're going on a long, car trip, or you just have that kind of swollen ankle and you want to see if there's some kind of natural substance that can help with that. You want to take it the right way, which is you want to have some dose, 1 to 2 capsules about every 5 to 6 hours, waking hours. Obviously, don't wake yourself up in the middle of the night to take a capsule, but waking hours. And that's when I've seen with my patients to be the most effective dose. So that's the message I wanted to get across. Cardiokinase has been out for a little over a decade now, and its precursor, nattokinase, had been out for even longer than that. But this is kind of the newest version. But the take-home message is that adding fish oil to this really significantly increases the effectiveness of being a fibrinolytic agent. So hopefully that's helpful. I will keep reading the studies and bringing you the information. Until then, keep it real.